Hello, audience, and welcome to our session today. I'm going to give about 60 seconds as I know more folks are joining us before we get started. We'll hop into the agenda and housekeeping and get you some information, and then we'll get today's show on the road. All right, let's get going with today's session. A student first data strategy, how colleges can transform data management to improve the student experience. I'm Josh Straley from Form Assembly, host of today's session, and obviously working with the Chronicle of Higher Education to host today's discussion. And thank you to the Chronicle for giving us this platform today. A quick look at today's agenda. We're going to hop into some housekeeping items, making sure you understand all of the tools and interaction channels that you have available to you during today's discussion. I'm going to introduce our panel, joined by two fantastic members of the higher ed community that I can't wait to have our conversation with today. Then we'll get into our discussion. There will be time for some Q&A at the end, and I'll have some resources. And if you're unfamiliar with Form Assembly, I'll do a quick cover of what we do and how we work with higher education institutions across the world. So first, some housekeeping. You've probably been to a webinar before, but just in case it's been a while, today's session is being recorded. And if you registered, the recording will be sent out after the call to the email that you registered with. I'd love, today we do have chat enabled. If you could let us know where you're joining us from in the chat, I'd love to hear from you. Chat will be open during today's discussion. Feel free to chat with your fellow participants. But if you have a question for today's panel that you would like answered, our Q&A is being moderated, so please use the Q&A box to send those questions over to us. Last but not least, I'm going to throw a couple of polls out to the audience today to help inform our discussion. I hope you will click on the answers that best meet your needs or your situation, and give us and the panel, give myself and the panel an idea of what your experience is with student experiences, data collection, and AI at your organization. So enough housekeeping for now. I'd love to introduce today's panel. Today I'm joined by Diane and TJ from their respective, organizations. Diane, I'd love if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I'm Diane Biesecker. I'm a senior Salesforce consultant at Cloud for Good. I have been a consultant in the Salesforce world for just over 4 years. Absolutely love it. I've been working in Salesforce since 2008 in all the different sectors, but just before becoming a consultant, I was at the University of Virginia at the public policy school. So some of you that maybe are at a smaller school within a larger school, some of this will really resonate with you as you hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing, we've got people joining from schools all over the world, really excited. TJ, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. TJ Summerford from University of Florida. I started working at UF in, May of 2000. And I've had a lot of different roles over the past 25, almost 26 years. And I've been helping to implement an enterprise Salesforce org on campus for the past 7, 8 years. So I've got a great team, and we've really enjoyed bringing Salesforce to UF.
Fantastic. And TJ, a member of our customer advisory board here at Form Assembly, we appreciate having that perspective and that insight on our board. Thank you so much for serving in that capacity. My name is Josh Straley. I'm our senior product marketing manager here at Form Assembly. I am deeply embedded in our webinar program. So if my face looks familiar and you've joined any other Form Assembly webinars, that's probably why. You've probably experienced my caffeine-powered conversation skills too. So I'm going to work on my pacing as we work through today's discussion. Because I'm really excited by what we're going to cover today. Every industry, every vertical, every organization is experiencing a lot of change in 2026 as our technology change, as our customer bases change, as our audiences change, and as the idea of what education looks like in 2026 changes. So we're going to touch on all of that today. Before we get started with our first discussion question, though, I do want to ask our first poll. Which of these best describes, audience, the data landscape at your organization, your university, your institution? Is it more of an island approach? Are you siloed? Do you see a patchwork quilt where some departments are reporting in and some aren't? Is it a data swamp? We hate to hear it, but we know that those exist. Or is it a unified front? And really, this is, I think rarer, but I do see some organizations actually pulling that kind of like 360-degree view, that promised land. I love some of in our chat are saying they're a bit of both, a patchwork swamp. That does sound like a delight, Joyce. Diane, TJ, if you had to guess, what percentages would you expect to shake out of this poll?
Hmm, I don't know. I think it'll somewhere float around the middle. Patchworks and data swamps being the norm, frankly.
Yeah. I have a weird perspective where I hear more of the problems, so I'm expecting more of that island approach. I hear a lot of
Mm,
silence.
I'd agree with you there,
Yeah,
Josh. The
yeah.
island approach.
Okay.
I,
Well, there
Wishful
our
thinking on my
guesses.
part.
We won't take real bets, but let's close the poll and see where we're at. All right, a patchwork quilt. Okay, hey, yeah, TJ, definitely on there. I'm glad to hear this. At the very least, what that says to me is we're seeing some breakdown of silos across universities. And I know just in my time working with Form Assembly, we talk to the higher ed community a lot. I know that this was an area of focus over the last several years. It sounds like we are making progress, and I want to say that because I know it can feel, especially at larger institutions, that progress is very difficult. But I know people like our panel are out there fighting the good fight, making better use of data. We're going to talk today about where some successes and some opportunities may be. Thank you, audience. You know how to use the poll button. That'll come in handy later today as well. Let's go ahead and hop into our discussion. My first question is I'm going to pose to Diane. Diane, as you said, you've seen how fragmented data collection can impact the student journey. From a student's experience, what does a broken data strategy feel like? And why is flexibility in form building and data capture so critical to fixing that experience?
Sure. Thank you, Josh. Yes, I have seen that firsthand. In fact, I had the pleasure of having my office be the first office students got to when they entered the advising area of our school, and it was glass wall. So Diane was very visible. And in 2018, I was so excited to deliver to them an experience site for the students that they could easily see their advisors and make an appointment in a couple clicks. I was so excited. They liked it too, but they were like, that's great, Diane, but what else can you do why do I have to, for admissions, I have one place I go. For advising, I send emails to figure out, and I have to figure out who I'm sending that email to. For career services, I have to go up there and sign in and pick up forms and things like that. I just don't know. Can you just make this the place where I can find everything? I can look up things. I can get to forms. I don't want paper forms that are filled out by a pen and handed into somebody's inbox, and I don't know what the status of it is. Also, admissions knows me really well. They know the name of my dog. They know what intramural sports I play. Why do I have to tell my advisor that stuff all over again in a small school that sits in the same building? So I listened to all of this, and we did build that experience site into the place where they could find everything, and they could find it in context, like apply for a teaching assistant's job, click here, or they could just be in the forms page where they could just find everything. Request a tutor, submit their internship verification, all sorts of things. But from the student's perspective, they didn't want to tell their story again. They wanted to know where to go. They didn't want to have to go to multiple places and have to figure it out themselves.
Right.
From the staff side, um, probably there was a staff side of this too. Probably the worst case scenario I saw was person B needed to edit some data from person A. Person A pulled up their Excel spreadsheet. I've always said my best process improvement starts with somebody's Excel spreadsheet. They printed it out and walked it down the hall. I observed this, handed it to them. The other person marked it up, handed it back to person A, and they updated their spreadsheet. This can't happen. As you know, as you probably know if you're in university staff, there are a lot of fire drills that come up at and it's last second, and it's getting from where you are now to where it's comfortable takes a transition of identifying this fire drill. Why don't we know the name of the capstone of that students that graduating to put on the graduation program? Why did we have to gather it in the last 3 days before the printing deadline? So you know how what it's like with these deadlines and fire drills. So it's the staff members struggled with having the right information about their students, updating. They didn't want to update it in one place and have to go update it in another place. Students didn't like that either. So really bringing this all together, it wasn't perfect. There's always still more work to do, but bringing it all together really streamlined it for the student, and they liked it. They still gave me suggestions for improvement all the time, but also for the staff, it gave them time. I literally had an advisor come to me and say, I actually can do my advising job now. So, it's those things that keep us going, but it really did change the way they were working and the way the students interacted.
It's so fascinating how, a student, especially like a freshman who has never heard of the concept of data visibility or, like understanding, status of a file or an approval process, can articulate just what they want. They write the user stories themselves, right? It's like, hey,
Yep.
I submitted a form. I need to know where that's at in the process so that I know if I'm being heard or if I've got months, to wait still. Um,
Yep.
that's fascinating stuff. I'm glad you talked about the staff side as well. TJ, I want to tap you into this as well. I think Diane, her experience and the students at her university's experience is pretty universal. But is there any other symptoms from the student side that they see when a school's data situation is not up to par?
I think the students really see it when, as Diane was talking about, when there's some fire drill, right? When some requirements change, we get a new requirement from the state or from some accrediting agency. And if a university doesn't have the tools and the systems in place to be nimble and to respond to those changing and evolving requirements in a way that you know, doesn't take the processes back 10 steps in terms of the efficiency. If the institution can respond in a way that inspires confidence and just seems natural to the students, and they don't even really need to know that the policies or the requirements for the institution have changed, but we as administrators and staff are able to stand up new forms, new processes that feed into the central enterprise systems. If we're able to do that in a way that's completely transparent to the students, then they don't even need to know that there's a data ecosystem that they're operating in. We take care of that for them. So having the right tools in place and managed in a sustainable way is really key to not having a broken data ecosystem that the students swim through.
Right, exactly. And to your point, it's both sides of the equation see the problems.
Right.
Staff can't, and if you're sitting in a glass room, that the pressure can be higher. But staff can't give people the information that these people expect them to have. I filled out so many forms. I mean, the relationship in CRM, right? Customer relationship management. Oftentimes, if you're not using the data that they give you, it can feel like there is no relationship. It feels like every time I come to this website, I am a new person, and you got to ask me information again. Um, really fascinating stuff, and I think global. This is the kind of problem that I hear a patchwork resulting in visibility issues kind of across the org. Diane, I think you did a great job of kind of laying out some of the costs of a broken system, where that slows down, where especially during fire drills, where that can hurt the institution. I'd love to throw our second poll up and ask our audience, what is the biggest hidden cost of your current data collection, especially those of you that said, you were a patchwork, and I feel for you that say that you're in the data swamp. You're definitely feeling mired down. But where do you think the biggest hidden cost is? Is it on students who have these milestone events? You only graduate once, unless they're grad students, as our chat has mentioned. Like you apply for student aid, those really high stress, high intensity moments. Is it those experiences for the student, or is it staff burnout? People that have been with their institution for years, decades, and it's like every year we go through the same fire drill. How can we stop this? What is the biggest cost for you? I'm intrigued. And of course, this is probably subjective. Staff are like, it's staff burnout. Students would be like, if we invited students to this webinar, they'd be like, it's my experience. What do we think? Diane and TJ, I'm hearing more from institutions. They're trying to access new opportunities with non-degree programs. And I think that is, when you're trying to spin up new programs, those commercial kind of experiences, those might be where institutions are turning their eye and realizing that they don't have the data to kind of go out to those audiences. What is your thought on this poll?
I'm thinking missed opportunities is a big one. That there was melt just because we weren't capturing a piece of data that would have sensed that melt was coming for a group of students, things like that. What do you
Mhm.
think, TJ?
Well, Josh, are you talking specifically about sort of non-degree seeking continuing education programs, or
Well, my
more?
poll is a little limited here. There's also missed opportunities in salvaging, a student, because you can see from their data if somebody is disengaging, right? If they're heading off course, if their degree is taking longer than expected. There's warning signs there in data, but then there's also opportunities. Someone might benefit from a certificate. If you
Okay.
have a partnership with, an employer, there might be a great audience inside of your data for that employer that you could hook up with a job. So opportunities more broadly.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge that we're facing at the University of Florida to help programs, departments, colleges engage with industry partners, right? Our Career Development Center does a great job of bringing employers to the university to interview graduating students and get them placed, but they really want those engagements to start when the students are enrolled and, taking classes at the university. And it can really be a challenge to do that. And we've had some preliminary conversations about enriching those relationships and tracking those conversations within our CRM, but it's a challenge. It's not a space that we typically occupy or serve very well, at least at our institution, campus wide. There are pockets of departments and schools that do it well. Our School of Business does it really well, the Warrington School of Business.
Nice.
Our engineering college does it well, but we really want to do it campus wide a little better.
Let's go ahead and close this poll. I'm very interested in our audience's experience here. All right. Yes, and I'm glad to see this breakout. The data processes aren't only fire drills, and especially manual processes can really contribute to staff feeling like they are not spending their time effectively, right? So I see why such a high percentage would say staff burnout, especially around data. But that missed opportunity, especially as education changes, as student demographics change, as older learners come in looking for short form, short term classes, those are opportunities that I know a lot of institutions are trying to spin up relatively quickly. And the data can hold you back there. And a lot of, and I think to TJ's point, a lot of those program implementations get pushed onto IT departments that perhaps are not ready to move into the commercial space. They're not used to shopping cart experiences, for classes. And we're seeing a lot of this lately come through as form assembly forms can be used for that kind of thing. So we've been seeing more of those. What else can we do with data? What else can we do with these form experiences for students to help our university or our institution kind of grow? And thank you, TJ. I mean, you kind of put a bow on that. I have my second question for you, and TJ, I'd love for you to take this one at least initially. When we talk about moving towards a single source of truth, or that 360-degree view that Salesforce likes to talk about, what do you think on the positive side? Because we've talked about challenges so far. What's the biggest aha moment for university staff when they finally have a centralized view or close to a centralized view of their data? Because I know it can be tough to.
Yeah, we had a meeting this morning with a particular college where it's actually a graduate and professional program that we're bringing into Salesforce right now. And we were working with their sort of recruitment and onboarding office. And we have through form assembly, their admitted students come in and provide a confirmation, and they put a seat deposit down. And then sort of the admissions counselors in this program need to follow up with the students and make sure that they follow through and they don't melt off before the beginning of the fall semester. And we had a request from one of these admissions counselors to bring in a certain piece of information, a certain piece of data from the student information system. So, we've already displayed a lot of information from Slate, which is our application processing system. We've got all the information from the students through the form assembly form with their interactions. And she was explaining how typically they have to pull a spreadsheet from one source, pull another spreadsheet from another source, combine them with VLOOKUPs, and that then gives them the answer that they needed. And in the matter of her vocalizing everything, we were able to give her a report in the middle of the meeting with the information because we already had it there in Salesforce. So we already had the interaction, the feedback from the students saying that they are going to be coming. That was brought in through form assembly into this enterprise CRM that was really enriched with all the information from the student information system. And she was she was so excited. She gave our team 5 stars. I said everybody gets a cookie, and it was just one of those simple moments that for us in our CRM team, it was a simple report update, but for her, it completely transformed how she manages this critical moment in onboarding new students, which is the lifeblood of their program. And that's really what having these types of integrated systems can do, regardless of the student population or where they are in their life cycle as a student.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can remove a VLOOKUP from someone's workflow, you are saving them tens
Right.
of minutes every time they touch that formula. I'm still struggling with it. So I love to hear that. But you're right. I mean, they know that that data is there.
Yeah.
They deal with that data, but they themselves are trying to hunt it down, and you can bring it to them
Right.
so much faster. So yeah, I mean, to your point, you just revolutionized your process. I hope you got the cookie. I was going to ask, it sounds like, time saving, yes, but I mean, a little bit of staff burnout there as well. Any other benefits
Yeah.
that you've seen, maybe more at the organizational level? You definitely saved that department some time. What do you think the organization has seen?
Uh, Across campus, I mean, we've had entire offices that have operated in really entrenched silos for decades, if not the entire life of the university. But now that they have this common ground that they all operate in within our enterprise Salesforce, and we've got a campus-wide enterprise org, right? It's not for one college or one department. We really serve 15 of the 16 colleges at our university. And with everyone operating on that same foundation, they're discovering ways of collaboration. And it's really been positive because they're able to come in and we bring them in with their silos sort of intact so that they're comfortable. But
Mm.
then once they're in, they start to realize the power of the really the transformative power of the collaboration that they can have within a platform, a unified platform like this. Um, yeah, I could go on.
Well, I love the way that you describe that because I think it's probably, especially at larger institutions, something that a lot of our audience is seeing, where there are politics around data. There are
Yeah.
politics around, in these individual departments, ownership. There's emotions. And I love that you were able to handle that while also showing them the benefits. That's the irony. When we talk about data, we obviously talk very technical, right? We're talking about Salesforce objects and student applications and records and fields, et cetera. But there is so much more context to data. These are people,
Oh yeah.
these are students, and then these are departments, and it's their history. And so you do have to move with some respect of that, though that can slow it down. No, but I love that. That's the implementation story I think people need to hear. Diane, any thoughts on universities that you've worked with, clients of Cloud for Good? Have they seen what's that aha moment kind of early in the process when you start breaking down those walls around data?
Well, I have seen a lot of that's like one of the main goals of almost every project that I work on, right? Is to get a 360 view. There's the politics, there's the data visibility, are the right people seeing the right amount, and you have to put some governance around it. And there's a plan behind that. But um the the thing that I've seen some people struggle with is they have this 360 view in their head and they won't release it because it's not 100%. It will never be 100%. There will always be something that needs to be in SIS or in some other system that is so, the dean's office reports. I'm making stuff up a little bit, but you will never get to 100%, get to 80%. It enhances everyone's lives that uses it, that 80%. Don't wait until you're at 90 or 95 or 100% because you won't get there. You know,
Yeah.
so that's what I've seen is like, and it's sometimes it's like pulling teeth. Please, let's just do this. Everybody's waiting for it. It's going to help them right now. You
The,
can
the
still move.
small
Yeah, go
the
ahead.
small incremental improvements, and that's what you build on. If you
Yeah,
can make someone's job just a tiny bit more efficient or palatable today than it was yesterday, that's a success that you build on. Yeah, absolutely. Don't try to boil
that,
the ocean.
that's how I got people hooked on Salesforce. I'd give them something that would make their life better, like a dashboard for that Excel sheet that went back and forth. And they were like, "Are you kidding me? I can press on this faculty dashboard and it's right in front of me. And it's the same one that Rebecca sees. Whew,
Right, incredible stuff. And you just saved somebody a lot of hallway trips.
that's right."
Diane, you touched on something that actually came up in our Q&A and audience. I do want to remind you, if you want questions answered by our panel, we will have a section to, answer these questions more lively. But Diane brought this up, so I want to touch on this right now. Our Koger notes that while data connectivity has value, please also speak about the importance of governing who's able to see the data items. Also, what has to be disclosed to students regarding how their data is incorporated into a student or into a university system. I love to talk about this. One of Form Assembly, and we won't talk about this too much, but Form Assembly has a commitment to security and compliance and giving universities the tools to help manage data compliantly, making sure that those who should not have access to certain fields, PHI, financial data, et cetera, do and do not have access. And there's audit trails as well. But I'd love to hear from your perspective, Diane, GRC, governance, risk and compliance, isn't every department's job, but they're impacted by it. How have you seen universities kind of work around that?
Well, and each university, TJ probably knows this, does it a little bit differently. I was at one school that we did our own thing, as almost every school did their own thing for a while until it starts to come together. But you have to have your own governance plan if you're by yourself. And then once it expands, I make it one governance. Don't make everybody do this. Nobody likes to do governance. So make it in one place, and you can still say for these kind of decisions, we go to Joe, which is fine, but Joe doesn't have to be involved with every decision. So that's how I've seen that work. When you're off on an island by yourself, you still have to govern the data and make sure that you have a process in place. If someone says, "Hey, I need to see addresses," you got to tell me why,
Mm.
and we have to run it through the right channels before we put addresses on our master list for this persona of people with this permission set.
Yeah. TJ, any permission kind of implementations that you have seen successful, especially as you bring, multiple colleges into the same system?
Yeah. So what we try to do in our IT shop is we try to build an architecture that can manage the nuanced governance that always comes into play, right? So you've got to be very mindful of how you build out the roles and profiles within Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using. You've got to be very careful about how you integrate the data from the student information system or from your ERP. Um, and at least from an IT perspective, if you stay focused on that architecture and know that there are going to be granular pieces of data that you have to hold very close to the breast for one office or another, but there are going to be other pieces of data that are really valuable to share broadly. If your architecture is built in such a way that it can address those data governance policies, then you've hit that sweet spot. And that's what we try to stay focused on in our IT team with the implementation. And then we're able to respond to whatever sort of governance policies come down. Some of the data that we hold and manage, the governance is decided by the registrar's office or by our HR office. And we have established at our university different data governance policies and practices. Some of the data is we put it in the students, they get to decide what's shared. We have our Disability Resource Center that manages accommodations for students. It's a whole complex suite of processes that combines Form Assembly and Salesforce. And when the students are given accommodations by this office, they can decide if advisors around campus are able to see those accommodations or not, because we have advisors operating in the same CRM. Some students want their advisors to see their accommodations, others don't. They want to keep them more private.
Right.
So, we've got an array of different practices in place to manage our data.
I'm glad you talked about, giving students control over their data. It's something that we see beyond higher ed, this kind of global shift towards trying to give individuals more control over their information and who they give it to and what it's used for. And I think all of us have experienced, what it means to have personal data out there in the wild. I can't count the number of times I've been given a free credit monitoring report because my data has been leaked by yet another organization. But especially with students, I think there's a part of education that, teaches people how they should manage their life beyond education as well, and giving them this idea of, hey, you own this information about yourself in our system, and you can choose who to share to. I think is really valuable. Um, Diane, I want to get back to my normal question list here. This conversation is going very well, and I really appreciate both of you and your notes so far. And audience, I love the questions. I'll try to answer any if I can weave them into our conversation, but please continue to ask questions. They are valuable. I understand that Cloud for Good recently worked on an Agentforce build for a university, specifically around financial aid. And with the Salesforce ecosystem, of course, Agentforce is the headline every time we read about this. So, how does moving toward AI-driven agents change the game for student support? And how does a solid data foundation make AI actually smart enough to be helpful? Because that's the big question in 2026.
Oh, right. I know there's a lot of diverse opinions about AI. We did a really neat thing with DePaul. We had already been working with them. We had student success and we did One Stop, which is case management for financial services and other teams. We did a knowledge base with them, and then we did a data engagement with them. But then we did this, we built an agent for the financial aid counselors from the back end, the
Hmm.
people helping the students through a phone call or an email. What was really, their two problems were the ever-changing, quickly changing policies on financial aid at the government level, the state level, at DePaul level. So even for the most senior counselors, it was hard to keep up and hard to remember, oh, that one thing changed. It finally came up 6 months later. Am I going to give the right answer, right? And then the second part was when they got someone new, there was so much to know, and the senior people knew it. They knew what to check. They knew what system to go in and check if this had been signed, or if they completed their application, or if they had accepted their offers. They knew what to check mostly.
Mhm.
So when a new person started, they were constantly having to ask the guy next door, and so they were using up two people's time trying to help this student We build an agent. So first of all, if they just did a general search, newbie, what's the policy for this? And it wasn't just the big policies that everybody knows. Sometimes they were really detailed policies. We set it up so it only searched studentaid.gov, the Illinois State Financial Aid site, and the DePaul website. So you weren't just Googling, right? It was pointed searching. The
Hmm.
best part was what you could do with a student. You're working with a student, you can put in the student ID and what aid year you're looking into. You could, in seconds, you can get a student summary, which is everything in their Salesforce account, everything in their SIS account, because we had just done that data engagement in one place in a couple seconds. All the neat data that the financial aid counselor said I need to see right up front. These are things I go look at. The next step to that could be, hey, show me their financial aid offer. What have they been offered every semester? What have they accepted? What have they declined? What scholarships do they have? What hasn't been signed? And that was in a nice summary table right through the agent in seconds. But my favorite part, and a lot of the counselors said this was their favorite part too, you could say, give me the action plan for this same student. It would go out and check 38 different scenarios. We met with the leadership and the senior counselors and said, what are the things you check? What are the things you always check? Okay, give me the next level too, and the next level. 38 scenarios it would go and check. And it would come back with, these are the three things that the student could do to advance their financial aid right now. They're stuck on this, this, and this. Here's a knowledge article that you can send to them to tell them how to unblock this. And it
Wow.
was just, I mean, no one, maybe someone could get all that right every time, but I doubt it. But it checked those 38 things in seconds. Think about the time saving and think about for a new person, I mean, financial aid counseling is a difficult sport. It's easy to get something wrong. And so they want to try to make it as right as possible.
Hmm.
And I feel like this really helped them with that. But again, pointed searches, finding out what they normally go do when they are helping a student and automate some of that. Let the agent do the hard work for you and pop back and there was some work that went into it. They had to make the knowledge articles that said, if you haven't accepted your offer, here are the instructions to do that.
Yeah, I
You
want
know,
to I want to key in on that work because I mean you basically you walked very well through how a lot of organizations are like handling developing agents. It's the resources that the agent is trained on. It is the context steps of the process, right, to that first, third, second, third degree. But there's also increasingly this conversation around the data that you feed in and how you keep that accurate and to your point, I think up to date. Was there a lot of work beyond developing those knowledge articles in making the institution's data, the records, the student records, for instance? Was there I don't want to call it infrastructure work, but was there work to get that data more correct, validated that you needed to do?
if we had not just had the previous engagement with them, there would have been.
Mm.
We we did student success, we did case management, we did knowledge base, we did data engagement with them. And the data engagement was brilliant to do it right before that because everything that we needed was right there. But if you were going in from scratch, yes, where do I get that? Oh, I get that from SIS. Oh, I get that from my financial aid system. I get this from this. Or this is in Salesforce. But so we had already kind of
Laid the
got a lot of
groundwork.
things right. But
Yeah.
honestly, truthfully, during testing, some of the things on some of those websites are incorrect, and it's like, yeah, well, we can't fix that, but you can report it.
Yes. I think a lot of, that engagement sounded like it went in the right order. I think a lot of institutions and outside of higher ed are also trying to start with the AI project, whether it be Agentforce or another tool, and then finding that they have to walk back 5 steps to where their data lives, where their data is being intake, or where data intake is occurring, and start to put gates, validation, rules on data intake so that these downstream systems like Agentforce, like Data Cloud, can
Yeah,
start to be complete and correct because these, especially in bigger institutions, there's a lot of ways that data gets into your system, and not all that data is where it needs to be or correct.
that's right. And then which direction is it going? Is it going front? Is it two-way communication? But it's hard to say yes to all of that. But they decided they would. They're all in. They want to do everything, and they've kept up with Salesforce renaming all of their products with Agentforce in the name. Hard
That's
to keep up.
also a difficult part of
I know.
TJ, any AI projects that UFL has been getting into that you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, so we're struggling in this space, to be honest. You just sort of outlined a little bit of our situation where we've tried to advance some tools and realized that we may not have all of our ducks in a row, really, and we've had to take a couple steps back. And so we're at the University of Florida, we've got tremendous resources when it comes to on-prem LLMs and other infrastructure that we have at our disposal. Surfacing them in a responsible way that gives reliable, consistent results, that's the challenge we're facing. And the process that Diane outlined that she went through with DePaul in terms of having the institution really outline their processes, develop those knowledge articles, that's ground that we haven't covered. And it's really critical, and I applaud them for doing that at DePaul. That's the way it needs to be done.
Yeah, yeah. Finding out from stakeholders how the process is occurring now, and then, but also taking that architect's approach where you see what the stakeholders have been doing and you improve it with data, right? Some things are walking up and down a hallway, if not physically, like that's the toll. There's a manual process there. I think there's always some efficiencies to uncover there. TJ, I want to stick with you for this next question. We often focus on a digital experience, right? Because we like to think that we're living in the future. But I know that many colleges and universities are still haunted by some paper, some manual entry. Do you have any examples of processes that you've automated? And, I've heard some really great stories from your team, NPS, CSAT scores and some processes that were already digital that you've made better. But is there any manual or paper-based processes that you've helped automate? And what's the impact that you've seen?
So many. Um, I'll tell you one of the big stories. We, like most institutions, faculty submit grades for their students, and inevitably, a grade needs to be changed, right? It may be that the student got an incomplete and they finished the course. It may be that there was, some issue with the grade and it needs to be changed a month, years after. There is a change of grade process at every institution. For decades and decades at the University of Florida, it was a paper process. A faculty member would go to the registrar's office and pull out some piece of paper from a folder. They had to really guard these forms. For a while, they had them numbered because you've got to have a lot of security around this. You don't want them floating around and have, fake change of grade come in. Faculty member fills it out. They carry it to their department chair. They then carry it to an associate dean in the college, and then they deliver it back to the registrar's office, and it goes into a black box. It sits in a folder under 500 other change of grade forms until it gets processed, and then everybody's happy with the new grade. So, you've got security issues. You've got manual processes that can break down in various places. You've got bottlenecks, and you've got black holes. And we brought the registrar's office into Salesforce. That we started tracking their cases, and the first step we did was, all right, let's not touch that process. First, let's say to all of these faculty and departments, submit your signed documents through a form assembly form. Just upload it, create a case. We did that for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. We got the metrics on how many different processes, the volume of change of grade over that period of time. We were then able to pinpoint this and a handful of other processes and say, these are the ones we need to tackle. So we took that change of grade process, turned it into an entirely digital process, all behind authenticated forms. Faculty members submit the form. The department and college administrators get email notifications. They come into their own authenticated form and make their approvals or denials. All along the way, you can track the process of this request. The students can go into their student portal and see that the change of grade request is pending at this stage or the next stage. And then the other thing, the registrar, when they finally had to process these forms, one, they had to validate, they had to make sure that it was legit. And then they had to go in and manually put the changes into the SIS. Now, because all of this is in Salesforce, where they're able to just go eyeball and say, yep, they can trust the process because at every stage, someone was doing it behind authentication. All they've got to do is push it through, and we've got an integration from Salesforce that pushes straight into the SIS and updates the record, and it's all tracked, it's all reportable. So that's been a real success case for us on our campus. We have other processes that we've done in a similar way. We've got a large college petition process that we brought online for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. Yeah, this is a real feather in our cap for what we've been able to deliver around campus.
Yeah, and I appreciate you called out the trust because beyond
Yeah,
all of the work and the time that you just saved so many different people, including the students, you're also allowing the staff to trust the data and to
right.
trust the process. And so there's less double checking and I think, it's not just efficiency, it's also feeling like, hey, we know what we know. We trust these approvals and that is another benefit beyond just getting rid of some paper. I'm sure there's still a couple numbered forms, but maybe one day you'll be able to frame them and throw them on the wall someday.
Yeah.
I know we're coming up to the end of our hour here, and I'm loving this conversation. I have one more question I want to get to both of our panelists, and then I'll open up for audience questions. Some, thankfully, a smaller percentage than I expected, but some of our audience reported that they're in a data swamp right now. For institutions that are overwhelmed by the disconnect of their data, right? The patchwork isn't working for them. It's too swampy. There isn't trust in their processes or their systems. What is the first step that they should take to transition to something that puts students first? And as we've heard, it's not just students first. This is a data strategy that helps your university as well. But focusing on student experiences here, what would be the first step there? Diane, I'll give TJ a break here. I'd love to start with you. You've worked with, your clients at Cloud for Good. What would you say the first step is?
You know, we've talked about some of the first steps that would be perfect here. And really the first step is getting a 360 view for the students, but it's in conjunction with data governance, but it's then working through what else could be in this 360 view that's in another system somewhere, and how do we get that? It's not all going to happen at one time. You've got to start somewhere kind of theory. So the 360 view is a great place to start, and then talk to the people that are using it. Hey, what are you still swivel chairing for over here? Could we bring a link to that system into here? If minimum, could we bring the two pieces of data that you need from that? Could we get approval to bring in that little bit at a time? It's just working through that part, but it's the larger solution is to use Data Cloud and to bring everything that you need into one place. It's hard to bite that off. It's hard to say yes and do it, but it's worth it, but it's hard to say yes.
Do you find that at universities there's a first department, like, the group of stakeholders that you need to establish true 360-degree view is huge, And
Mhm.
is there a first department or a first person, that perhaps a Salesforce admin for a university is on the call today? Where would you point them in the direction? What office would you say, hey, start the conversation here?
That's a good question, and every university is structured a little bit differently, but I would try to get either admissions or advising on my side and get them to work for me because they're not going to listen to me. Like the provost or whoever you need to get permission from. You need to get some army on your side to get together a plan and get them to say, this is going to make my life better, instead of Diane going and saying, hey, I have this neat idea to spend some money and make everybody's life happier. They're not going to believe me.
hmm
So
And I think I resonate with the idea that admissions might be the way to tie it to, because you can easily start to say, hey, we're impacting revenue here as well.
yeah,
It
Yeah.
starts to make that spend a little bit easier. I asked that follow-up question mostly because in my I've done other webinars with higher ed as a focus, and that institutional mandate, finding someone at the organization that has data on the mind and improving
Yeah.
that data ecosystem can be difficult because it's so much easier if it rolls downhill. But so often leaders at a university might not realize the day-to-day problems and the fire drills that we're experiencing.
Yeah.
TJ, what would you say if you had to pick a first step? And I won't put you on a spot for a department. It might have been your department. It might be IT, but a first step, what would you say is a good first step for building that student first ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that sort of I have 2 points. One, a lot of times we go into implementing a CRM on campus, and we just because of who we are, we're putting the staff and the enterprise offices at the center of the conversation. And I think it can really transform how you look at an implementation if you put the student at the center of the conversation and really try to make the process and the implementation student focused.
Hmm.
What the staff do with the information that the students provide and that the students interact with can, have all sorts of complexity that the students don't need to understand and realize. For the students, this should be easy, this should be transparent, it should be natural, right? But if you put the student at the center of the conversation, it helps redefine the conversation. Not what can we do to make this job easier for this staff member, but what can we do to make this process simpler and easier to understand for the student. The student doesn't need to know what the bursar's office is, doesn't need to know the difference between the bursar and student financial affairs. They've got money questions, so address their money questions. So that's kind of point number one, put the student at the center of it. And then in an ideal world, and I don't know where the ideal world is, but in an ideal world, I would think you'd want to start with something vaguely called student success, right? For some colleges and universities, that means academic advising as a specific place. It may mean some part of student life, but if you start with this idea of student success at the center of what you're doing, you build out from there, then I think you have the guiding principle that you want. That's your North Star. Sometimes if you start with admissions, it really is about the revenue generation, and it can sort of there's so much that you can do around admissions in the CRM. It really can become very salesy, which sometimes it needs to be. But it can distort a little bit what should be at the center, which is, students come in, you want them to be successful so that they graduate and have successful careers. And so focus on the student success if you can. But sometimes you've got to follow where the money's being invested. But wherever you start, build it in a way that it can scale to these other purposes. Don't rename contact student, things like that. Understand the architecture so that it can really scale to serve the entire campus.
I love that. And Diane, you might want to write a book because to TJ's point, the first step might be putting someone in a glass office right when the students walk in on campus, because then you start getting that feedback and you can really get their perspective. That glass office at the front door might be the way to say start your data conversation there. Um, Fantastic. Audience, I threw a note to you just to drive it home. I'm going to throw our question slide up on the screen. Any questions for our panel, please add them to our Q&A module. We've got one from Eric here, submitted a little bit earlier in the conversation when we were talking about governance of data. And we also touched on, student success and using data to drive that. Their question: what is your position on revealing data to students that involve some of those predictive analytics that indicate the probability of success, persistence, and retention? I actually got a touch base with a university in Kuwait that had a really successful student success prediction program running at the university. And they didn't reveal that to the student, but they did a lot of intervention, right? And they did it as early as possible when they saw attendance rates dip or grades dip. They had multiple inputs into the system, and they had that advising office, essentially have tasks that sprang up that got them in contact with the student very early. So I don't know, this is obviously a relatively new a way of applying data to the student experience, but do either of you have any opinions about surfacing success metrics to students?
We have used some of the predictive analytics, but surfacing success metrics to students. Instead of letting them see their metrics, we did things like if this happened, send them an appointment invitation with their advisor, or send this to their advisor to ask them to take action on that. If they hadn't registered for classes by this date, send out an alert to the right people that could do something about it, but not every once in a while. Some of it went to a student like, you haven't submitted this, or but it was mostly to the staff members who then could take the appropriate action. It kind of takes a little bit of the machine
Yeah.
activity out of it and puts some real person activity in it.
Right. I don't know, I'm no longer a student, but I don't know how I would respond to perhaps an automated email that said, I look like I'm going to be a dropout, like,
Yeah, that's not great.
yeah. It could be troublesome, but in this age of data, I could see some benefits here as well, and maybe newer student audiences would respond to that a little bit differently. I have one more question to get to. Automating manual processes sound great, but we're already stretched a little thin. How long does it typically take for other orgs to transition from a paper-based process to a digital one? I know that implementation timelines can vary. Any ballparks from our panel?
Start small. Really, like we did with the registrar's office before we built the fully digital change of grade process, we said, all right, let's just take those PDFs, come through a form, create a case, tag that case, classify it. Then you start building the metrics, and then you make the argument for what you need to fully digitize. And then you've got the backing as well from the data to where you need to spend your time and effort. Start small.
Yeah, and build a case for further work there. I love that, TJ. That's
Exactly. Yeah.
great idea. Diane?
Yeah, I'll agree with TJ on that. It's never ending. You're never going to get to the end of that list, in my opinion. I always love to automate everything, but there's big things that then give people more time to think about what the other things might be. Like staff members often can't even stop to tell you what their problems are because they're so busy. But if you can carve out, 20 minutes a day to start with, and then an hour a week with this automation, it helps you. It's kind of an ongoing process. So it's really hard to say how long this would take, because it's just you just have to pick pick a quick hitter first, and then pick a big one, a big one, a big one, that kind of process.
And also understand that a proper living CRM is constantly evolving. We've had our enterprise CRM on campus for I think 8 years now, and we're still adding fields from the student information system. We're still expanding and changing. So you really have to have an engaged technical team managing the CRM and understand that it is going to constantly evolve, and that's what has value for it. That's the value that you bring to campus for something like this.
Yeah, truly, the project never stops. The
Right?
implementation.
No,
Um,
that's true.
Fantastic. Audience, I think we've gone through our list of questions. Miss Daphne, not a question, but I want to pass this on from the chat. They say, thank you for this great conversation. We tend to forget the basics, connect the student data from every source, wherever it is. And I think I largely agree with that. As Diane mentioned, there are some sources that perhaps need to be siloed for governance reasons, but in general, the more you can centralize that data, the better chance you have to start to rebuild processes and digitize processes and find those efficiencies. And when your students are looking for updates, you can usually surface those in a portal as well, which I'm glad we talked about. Panelists, I want to thank you so much. Before we go today, I just want to talk to the audience a bit. If you're unfamiliar with Form Assembly, we're a data collection platform. We make it super simple for you to build web forms like application forms, like internal forms for advisors or bursars offices to get in contact with each other to update update those spreadsheets that they were passing around. We make implementation times very quick because we're super easy to use, but we also have security and compliance standards built in so we can support the most sensitive data collection processes that you have at your university. If you're looking to modernize the experience at your university, or as I have on this slide, future-proof it for that continuing implementation, especially with your Salesforce CRM, we'd love to talk. We have use cases across every college, every institution, no matter how big and small, whether you're looking for your RFI forms or alumni donations across the student experience. We'd love to have that conversation. You may see some links dropped into the chat for some further resources. We've got some white papers for you. We also have a user conference for Form Assembly and what we call Form Fest at the end of this month on the 25th. We've got some great higher ed focused sessions. If you're looking to just learn a little bit more about what data collection looks like, something a bit more technical, we would get into a demo, etc. Please join us for that. You'll see my face in a couple of those. And last but not least, I have a final poll for you. If you'd like us to take the workout and you want to have a conversation with the Form Assembly team, if you can throw a yes into our poll here, we'll make sure that someone reaches out to you. And it won't be me. You've listened to me enough for today. But before we go, I want to extend a very heartfelt thanks to Diane and TJ. A great conversation. Higher ed is one of those industries that is changing so fast, and I hesitate to call it an industry because education is, more than that. It can be an art form. But I really appreciate your time. Thank you. If you'd like to say goodbye to the audience, I'll give you a moment before we log off today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. It's nice to be here with you today.
Thank you both. And thank you, audience, again. If you have any questions, please visit formassembly.com. Have a wonderful day.